Everyone in the kingdom knew one rule: never challenge the Alpha King. But one Omega broke that rule after one drink, one smile, and one unforgettable word: bad boy. The grand hall of the Blackthorn territory was glowing beneath hundreds of golden lights, filled with the voices of werewolves from every corner of the kingdom. It was a night of celebration, a rare evening when the royal pack gathered together without the weight of serious decisions and endless responsibilities. Among the guests stood Emma Whitmore, an Omega who had never expected to be noticed by anyone important. She was not born into a powerful family. She did not carry a famous name. She was simply someone who believed a kind heart mattered more than a title. Emma spent most of her life helping others, quietly proving that strength was not always about having power. Sometimes strength was choosing kindness when the world gave you every reason not to. That night, Emma only wanted to enjoy the celebration with her friends. She had no idea that the mysterious man standing near the balcony was the one person everyone in the room feared and respected. Adrian Blackwood, the Alpha King, watched the crowd with his usual calm expression. To everyone else, he was a symbol of authority, a leader whose presence could silence an entire room. People carefully chose their words around him, always remembering his position before speaking. But Emma did not know any of that. When she noticed the serious-looking man standing alone, she simply saw someone who looked like he needed a reason to smile. "You know," Emma said with a playful smile, "for someone at a party, you look like you are judging everyone." Adrian turned toward her, surprised. Very few people dared to speak to him so casually. Emma tilted her head and laughed softly. "Relax. You are allowed to have fun sometimes, bad boy." The moment those words left her mouth, the entire area around them became quiet. Several guests looked at her with disbelief. They knew exactly who she was talking to. Emma, however, only noticed the silence and wondered if she had said something unusual. Adrian studied her carefully. He expected fear. He expected an apology. He expected someone to realize their mistake immediately. Instead, he saw someone who was simply being honest. For the first time in years, someone looked at him without seeing the crown, the power, or the responsibility. They just saw him. A small smile appeared on Adrian's face, surprising everyone nearby. "Do you always speak to strangers like that?" he asked. Emma shrugged. "Only when they look like they need someone to remind them to enjoy life." Her answer stayed with him. Adrian had spent years surrounded by people who respected the Alpha King, but almost no one cared about Adrian the person. Yet this Omega, who did not even know his identity, had somehow noticed the one thing everyone else ignored. As the night continued, Emma returned to her friends, believing the moment would soon be forgotten. She had no idea that her simple words had created a memory the Alpha King would never forget. And Adrian Blackwood, the most powerful werewolf ruler in the kingdom, had no idea that the Omega who called him a bad boy would soon become the person who changed his entire world. The morning after the royal celebration, Emma Whitmore woke up believing the unusual conversation from the night before was nothing more than a small, funny moment she would remember and smile about someday. She had no idea that the man she casually teased had been thinking about the same moment ever since. Adrian Blackwood, the Alpha King, was not someone who easily forgot things. His days were usually filled with meetings, decisions, and countless expectations from the kingdom. Every person around him measured their words carefully. Every conversation followed the same pattern of respect and distance. But Emma had been different. She had looked at him and seen a person instead of a title. That simple difference stayed in his mind. Throughout the day, Adrian found himself remembering her expression, her confidence, and the way she spoke without hesitation. He had met many people who wanted something from him, but Emma had wanted nothing. She did not know his power. She did not know his position. She simply noticed that he looked like someone who needed a reason to smile. For Adrian, that was something he had not experienced in years. Meanwhile, Emma continued her normal routine, helping prepare supplies for families in the outer villages of the kingdom. She had already forgotten the mysterious man from the balcony, assuming he was just another guest at the celebration. Her friends, however, could not stop talking about it. "Emma, do you realize who you were speaking to?" one of them asked. Emma looked confused. Someone who needed to relax? Her friends stared at her in disbelief. That was Adrian Blackwood, the Alpha King. The realization slowly reached her. Her eyes widened as she remembered every word she had said. She had not meant any disrespect. She had simply been honest. "I did not know," Emma whispered. But instead of feeling ashamed, she realized something important. She had spoken to him the same way she would speak to anyone else because she believed everyone deserved kindness. Later that afternoon, Emma received an unexpected invitation to visit the royal gardens. She wondered why someone from the palace would want to see her, but curiosity led her there. When she arrived, Adrian was waiting beneath the tall trees surrounding the garden paths. This time Emma immediately recognized him. She quickly lowered her gaze, unsure of what to say. Adrian noticed the change and smiled slightly. "You seem different today," he said. Emma looked up. "I know who you are now." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Adrian asked, "Does knowing my title change the way you see me?" Emma thought carefully before answering. "No. It only explains why everyone else was so quiet." Her honest response surprised him. Adrian had expected her to become nervous, but she remained the same person. The Omega who had spoken to him without fear was still there. That was exactly what caught his attention. As they walked through the garden, Adrian began asking about her life. He wanted to know why someone with such a gentle nature carried herself with so much confidence. Emma simply smiled and said, "Because everyone deserves to be treated like they matter." Those words followed Adrian long after their conversation ended. For the first time in a long time, the Alpha King felt curious about someone not because of their importance to the kingdom, but because of the peace they brought into his life. And Emma still had no idea that her simple honesty had awakened something the most powerful werewolf leader had never expected to feel. After the unexpected meeting in the royal gardens, Emma Whitmore returned home with a feeling she could not quite explain. She had expected the Alpha King to be distant, serious, and impossible to understand. Instead, she had discovered someone who listened, someone who seemed almost relieved to have a conversation without expectations. Still, Emma reminded herself that Adrian Blackwood was the ruler of the werewolf kingdom. Their worlds were completely different. She was an Omega who lived a simple life, while he carried the responsibility of an entire kingdom on his shoulders. She never imagined that someone like him would remember a conversation with someone like her. But Adrian did remember. The days following their meeting felt unusual for the Alpha King. He found himself thinking about the small details Emma had shared. The way she smiled when talking about helping others. The way she believed every person deserved respect. The way she never once tried to impress him. Adrian had spent years surrounded by people who wanted his approval, but Emma had offered him something far more rare. She offered honesty. One afternoon, Adrian visited the village areas near the royal territory. He wanted to understand the lives of the people beyond the palace walls. When he arrived, he noticed Emma was there helping organize supplies and assisting families who needed support. She moved through the crowd with patience and warmth, treating everyone with the same care. Adrian watched quietly from a distance. He had seen many people speak about kindness, but Emma lived by it. When she finally noticed him, she smiled naturally. "Are you checking if I am working correctly?" she asked playfully. Adrian was surprised that she could still joke with him after knowing his identity. "Perhaps I am trying to understand how you make helping others look so effortless," he replied. Emma looked thoughtful. "Maybe. Because I do not think of it as something special. People just need someone to care." Her answer stayed with him. Later, as they walked through the village paths, Adrian asked about her past. Emma hesitated at first, but eventually shared that being an Omega had not always been easy. Many people had underestimated her because of her place in werewolf society. They assumed she was someone who needed to be protected instead of someone who could make a difference. Adrian listened carefully. For the first time, he saw the hidden strength behind her gentle nature. Emma had faced judgment but never allowed it to make her bitter. She continued choosing kindness even when the world did not always return it. "You are stronger than you realize," Adrian said quietly. Emma looked surprised. Most people do not see it that way. Adrian looked at her with understanding. Most people are only looking at what is obvious. Those words touched something inside Emma. She had spent so much time believing she was ordinary that she had forgotten her value was never determined by how others viewed her. As the sun began to set, Adrian realized that his interest in Emma was no longer simple curiosity. There was something about her presence that brought calm into his life. Something about her made the weight of being Alpha King feel lighter. And somewhere deep within him, a quiet instinct began whispering a truth he was not ready to fully accept. The Omega who saw beyond his crown might be the one person he had been waiting for all along. The connection between Adrian Blackwood and Emma Whitmore continued to grow in ways neither of them expected. What began as a simple conversation at a royal celebration had slowly become something that changed the way they saw the world around them. For Adrian, every meeting with Emma revealed another reason why she was different from anyone he had known before. She did not care about the crown, the title, or the power that followed him everywhere. She cared about the person beneath it all. For Emma, spending time with the Alpha King remained something she struggled to understand. She never imagined someone as important as Adrian would want to hear about her thoughts, her experiences, or the small moments that shaped her life. Yet every conversation proved that he truly listened. One morning, Adrian invited Emma to the Royal Archives, a quiet place inside the palace where generations of werewolf history were preserved. Emma expected to see ancient records about battles, rulers, and traditions, but Adrian showed her something different. He showed her stories about leaders who changed their kingdoms not through strength alone, but through wisdom and compassion. Most people only remember the powerful names in history, Adrian said as they walked between the tall shelves. But the greatest changes often came from those who understood others. Emma looked at the old books surrounding them, maybe because people remember how someone made them feel more than what they achieved. Adrian paused at her words. They were simple, but they carried a meaning he had rarely considered. As Alpha King, he had always focused on decisions, responsibilities, and protecting the future of his kingdom. But Emma reminded him that a leader was not only measured by what he accomplished. A leader was also remembered by how he treated those around him. During their time in the archives, Adrian noticed something unusual. An old record about rare bonds between alpha leaders and their destined partners caught his attention. The writings described a connection built on trust, balance, and a feeling of peace that could not be explained by ordinary circumstances. Adrian quietly read the passage, feeling a strange familiarity with the words. He had felt that same sense of calm whenever Emma was near. But he did not tell her what he had discovered. He wanted their connection to be based on something real, not simply a name written in an ancient record. Later that day, Emma noticed Adrian seemed quieter than usual. "You look like you are carrying a difficult thought," she said. Adrian smiled slightly. "Perhaps I am trying to understand something I never expected." Emma tilted her head. "And what is that?" He looked toward the palace gardens outside the window. "How someone can enter your life and change the way you see everything." Emma did not know how much those words revealed. She only smiled and reminded him that everyone needed someone who could make them see things differently. As the days passed, whispers began spreading throughout the royal territory. People noticed that the Alpha King was no longer as distant as before. They noticed the calm expression that appeared whenever Emma was nearby. Some were curious about the Omega who had captured his attention. Others wondered how someone so ordinary could create such a remarkable change. But Adrian knew the truth. Emma was not changing him because she wanted influence or recognition. She was changing him because she reminded him of the person he had always been beneath the crown. And for the first time, the Alpha King wondered if fate had brought the most unexpected person into his life for a reason. The days following Adrian Blackwood's discovery in the Royal Archives brought a quiet change that even he could not ignore. The Alpha King had spent years believing that every decision in his life had to be guided by responsibility and tradition. But now, whenever Emma Whitmore was near, he found himself thinking about something beyond duty. He began wondering about happiness, trust, and the simple comfort of being understood. Emma noticed the difference as well. The man she first met at the celebration had seemed impossible to approach, surrounded by silence and respect. But the Adrian she knew now was someone who asked questions, listened carefully, and valued her thoughts. She never tried to change him. She simply reminded him that he was more than the title he carried. One afternoon, Adrian invited Emma to join him during a visit to the outer villages of the kingdom. He wanted her perspective because he had learned that she saw things others often missed. As they walked through the peaceful streets, Emma greeted everyone warmly. She remembered names, asked about families, and noticed small details that showed people they mattered. Adrian watched quietly, realizing that Emma's kindness was not something she displayed only when important people were watching. It was part of who she was. "You treat everyone the same," Adrian said. Emma looked at him with a curious smile. "Should I treat people differently because of their position?" Adrian did not answer immediately. For most of his life, people had treated him differently because he was the Alpha King. Some admired him. Some feared disappointing him. But Emma reminded him that respect did not have to create distance, could create connection. Later that evening, they sat beneath the quiet lights of the palace gardens. Adrian spoke about the loneliness that came with leadership. He explained that many people knew his achievements but very few knew his thoughts. Emma listened without interrupting. She did not offer empty words or pretend to understand every burden he carried. She simply stayed beside him and allowed him to be honest. "You know," Emma said softly, "sometimes the strongest people are the ones who need someone to remind them they do not have to carry everything alone." Adrian looked at her, surprised by how deeply her words affected him. He had heard countless speeches about leadership and strength, but none had reached him the way Emma's simple honesty did. Meanwhile, rumors continued spreading throughout the kingdom. Many wondered why the Alpha King spent so much time with an Omega who had no royal background. Some believed she was too ordinary to stand beside him. But Adrian saw what others could not. Emma's value did not come from a title, a family name, or a position in society. Her value came from the way she made people feel seen. As the connection between them grew stronger, Adrian began noticing something he could no longer dismiss. His instincts felt calmer around Emma. The constant pressure that followed him seemed quieter whenever she was near. It was as if some hidden part of him recognized something before his mind fully understood it. Emma still did not know the truth behind their connection. She only knew that the Alpha King who once seemed unreachable had become someone she trusted. And Adrian knew that the Omega who once called him a bad boy had become the one person who made him feel like himself again. The connection between Adrian Blackwood and Emma Whitmore had reached a point where neither of them could pretend it was just a simple friendship. Every conversation, every shared moment, and every quiet understanding between them created a bond that felt impossible to ignore. Yet the truth behind that connection remained hidden, waiting for the right moment to be revealed. Adrian continued searching through the ancient records of the royal archives, hoping to understand why Emma affected him in a way no one else ever had. He found many stories about alpha leaders throughout history, but one particular passage continued to draw his attention. It described a rare bond between an alpha and an omega, a connection built not on power or status, but on balance, trust, and a feeling of belonging. The words felt strangely familiar. They reminded him of the peace he experienced whenever Emma was near. Meanwhile, Emma noticed that something about Adrian had changed. The Alpha King who once seemed distant and unreachable had become more open with her. He shared his thoughts, listened to her advice, and allowed her to see parts of himself that others never witnessed. But Emma still wondered why someone so powerful would care about someone like her. One evening, while walking through the palace gardens, she finally asked the question that had been on her mind. "Why do you trust me?" Adrian looked at her quietly. He had expected many questions throughout his life, but this one felt different. "Because you never tried to impress me," he answered. "You never cared about the crown. You cared about the person wearing it." Emma lowered her gaze, unsure how to respond. She had never considered that something so simple could mean so much. She only believed that everyone deserved honesty and kindness. Adrian smiled softly. "Do you realize how rare that is?" Emma shook her head. "I think everyone deserves to be treated that way." Those words reminded Adrian why she was different. She did not believe kindness was a special gift reserved for important people. She believed it was something everyone should receive. As their conversation continued, a sudden realization began forming in Adrian's mind. The ancient records were not simply describing a legend. They were describing something that felt incredibly close to his own experience. His instincts as an alpha had always guided him, but this feeling was different. It was not about authority or control. It was about connection. It was about finding someone who brought balance into his life. Later that night, Adrian stood alone in the royal hall, looking at the symbols carved into the walls by generations of alpha leaders. For the first time, he wondered if fate had been guiding him toward Emma from the very beginning. He had spent years believing that being an alpha king meant standing above everyone else. But Emma had shown him something completely different. She showed him that true strength came from understanding, compassion, and the courage to let someone see the person behind the title. Emma still did not know the secret Adrian was discovering. She did not know that their meeting might have been written into the history of the werewolf kingdom long before they ever crossed paths. She only knew that the man everyone called the Alpha King had become someone she could trust. And Adrian knew that the Omega who once spoke to him without fear might be the one person destined to stand beside him. The truth Adrian Blackwood discovered in the ancient records changed the way he viewed everything around him. For years, the Alpha King had believed that destiny was a responsibility, something written in old stories that leaders were expected to follow. But now, standing at the center of his own life, he began to understand that destiny was not about power or position. It was about finding the person who brought out the best part of who he truly was. Emma Whitmore remained unaware of the secret Adrian carried. She continued helping people throughout the kingdom, never realizing that the simple kindness she offered had reached the heart of the most powerful werewolf leader. To Emma, Adrian was no longer just the Alpha King. He was someone who had shown her respect when others had overlooked her. He was someone who listened when others ignored her voice. One morning, Adrian invited Emma to join him in the royal gardens once again. The peaceful paths had become the place where they shared their most honest conversations. As they walked beneath the tall trees, Adrian finally opened up about the pressure he carried as a leader. "Everyone expects me to always know the answer," he said quietly. "Sometimes I wonder if anyone would still respect me if they saw my doubts." Emma looked at him with understanding. "Being unsure does not make you weak. It means you are human." Her response surprised him. Many people had spent years reminding him that an alpha must always appear perfect. Emma was the first person who reminded him that even a king could have moments of uncertainty. Later that day, Adrian introduced Emma to some of the royal advisors. He wanted them to hear her ideas and understand why her perspective mattered. Some were surprised that the Alpha King valued the opinion of an Omega, but Adrian did not hesitate. "A person's worth is not decided by their title," he explained. "It is decided by their actions and their heart." Emma listened quietly, touched by his words. She had spent much of her life believing that she needed to prove herself before others would respect her. But Adrian saw something in her that she had never fully recognized in herself. He saw courage. He saw wisdom. He saw a strength that did not need to announce itself. As the days passed, more members of the kingdom began noticing the change in their Alpha King. Adrian was still a powerful leader, but he was no longer as distant as before. His decisions carried more understanding, and his connection with the people grew stronger. Many believed the change came from experience, but Adrian knew the truth. It came from Emma. That evening, while looking through the ancient records once again, Adrian found the final piece of the mystery he had been searching for. The description of the fated bond matched every feeling he had experienced. The calmness, the trust, the sense of belonging. For the first time, he accepted what his instincts had been telling him. Emma was not simply someone who entered his life by chance. She was the Omega connected to his destiny. But before revealing the truth, Adrian wanted to be certain of one thing. He did not want Emma to choose him because of fate. He wanted her to choose him because she knew the person behind the crown. And as he looked toward the palace gardens where Emma was waiting, he realized that the greatest challenge would not be accepting destiny. It would be proving that his heart had chosen her long before he understood why. The truth Adrian Blackwood had discovered in the ancient records remained in his heart, as he tried to understand what it meant for his future with Emma Whitmore. The Alpha King had faced countless decisions throughout his life, but this one felt different. It was not about the kingdom, tradition, or the expectations placed upon him. It was about a person who had changed the way he saw himself. Emma had never asked for a place beside him. She had never tried to gain influence through their connection. She had simply been herself, and that was exactly why Adrian trusted her more than anyone else. Meanwhile, Emma noticed that something about Adrian seemed different. He appeared more thoughtful, almost as if he was carrying a secret he was not ready to share. She wondered if the responsibilities of being Alpha King had become too heavy again, but she never pressured him to explain. She understood that some things needed time. One evening, Adrian invited Emma to a quiet area of the palace where the gardens overlooked the entire kingdom. The view stretched across the land, showing villages, forests, and the home of countless werewolves who depended on his leadership. Emma looked at the peaceful scene and understood something she had never considered before. Behind the power of the Alpha King was a person who cared deeply about every life in the kingdom. "You carry everyone's worries with you, don't you?" Emma asked softly. Adrian looked at her with surprise. "How did you know?" She smiled gently. "Because you always think about others before yourself." Those words affected him more than she realized. Many people praised his strength, but few noticed the responsibility behind it. Emma saw what others missed. She saw the heart behind the crown. Adrian finally decided to share part of the truth with her. He explained that ancient records spoke about a rare connection between an alpha leader and an omega whose presence brought balance and peace. He did not reveal everything yet, but he wanted her to understand that their meeting felt meaningful. Emma listened carefully, unsure how to respond. "Are you saying our paths were meant to cross?" she asked. Adrian looked at her honestly. "I am saying that meeting you changed me in ways I never expected." Emma felt her heart soften. She never wanted to be important because of a legend or a title. She only wanted to be valued for who she was. "I hope you see me as Emma," she said quietly, "not just as someone connected to a prophecy." Adrian stepped closer, his expression filled with understanding. "That is exactly why you matter to me. Before I knew anything about destiny, I already respected you." His answer gave Emma a feeling she could not describe. For the first time, she believed that maybe she did belong somewhere she never expected. As their connection continued to grow, the kingdom slowly began accepting the bond between them. Those who once questioned why an Omega stood near the Alpha King started seeing the truth. Emma was not changing Adrian through power or influence. She was reminding him of the values he wanted his kingdom to represent: kindness, understanding, respect. Later that night, Adrian stood beneath the moonlit sky, finally accepting what his heart already knew. The Omega who once spoke to him without fear had become the person who brought peace to his world. And soon, the entire kingdom would learn the truth about the bond that had been waiting for them all along. The morning sun rose over the Blackthorn Kingdom, casting a warm light across the palace gardens where Adrian Blackwood and Emma Whitmore had shared so many quiet conversations. After everything they had discovered, the moment had finally arrived when the truth could no longer remain hidden. Adrian knew that the bond between them was not simply a mysterious feeling or an ancient story written in old records. It was something real, something that had changed both of their lives forever. Yet before he revealed everything, he wanted Emma to understand one important thing. His feelings for her were not created by destiny. They existed because of who she was, the Omega who had looked beyond his crown. The woman who had treated the Alpha King like an ordinary person when everyone else saw only power. The royal hall was filled with members of the Werewolf Kingdom as Adrian prepared to speak. Emma stood nearby, still unsure why so many important people were gathered. She never expected recognition. She never wanted attention. She only wanted to remain the same person she had always been. Adrian stepped forward and addressed the kingdom. He spoke about leadership, compassion, and the importance of valuing people for their character rather than their position. Then he turned toward Emma. "Many people see an Omega and only notice what they believe she lacks," Adrian said. "But I saw what everyone else ignored. I saw courage. I saw kindness. I saw someone who reminded me what true strength means." The room became quiet as everyone listened. Emma felt overwhelmed not because of the attention, but because Adrian was honoring the part of her that she had always tried to protect. She had spent years believing that being overlooked was something she simply had to accept. But standing beside the Alpha King, she finally understood that her worth had never depended on the opinions of others. Adrian then shared the truth about their connection. He explained that ancient records spoke of a rare bond between an Alpha King and an Omega whose presence could bring balance to the kingdom. But he also made something clear. He did not choose Emma because of a prophecy. He chose her because she had already changed his heart before he understood why. Emma looked at him with emotion in her eyes. I never wanted to be chosen because of what I am, she said. I wanted to be seen for who I am. Adrian smiled. That is exactly why I chose you. Over time, the kingdom began to change. The people who once judged Omega werewolves by their status started seeing their value differently. They learned that strength was not only found in authority. It was found in patience, compassion, and the courage to care. Adrian remained the Alpha King, respected by all, but now he was also someone who understood the importance of connection. Emma remained the same kind and humble Omega, but she no longer questioned whether she belonged. Together, they became a reminder throughout the kingdom that destiny was not about creating a perfect story. It was about bringing two people together who could help each other become better. The Alpha King who once carried the world alone found someone who understood him. The Omega who once felt invisible found someone who truly saw her. And beneath the endless sky of the werewolf kingdom, their story became proof that the greatest power was not found in a crown, but in a heart brave enough to love and be understood.